All right, let's go on the record.
Good morning. Now before the court is Hampshire County Civil Action 1780 CB 0033, Patrick Buchanan et al. Versus the Town of Greenfield et al. This matter is scheduled for the continuing jury trial.
All right, good morning. I understand there's a motion for mistrial. I'll hear from you in a brief moment. Let me just get logged in. Do we have all our jurors?
Yes, we do, Your Honor.
Okay. Okay, Attorney Kestner, I'll hear from you on your motion.
Yes, Your Honor. I've not had time to type it yet, but as I was preparing for my cross last night, it occurred to me it's impossible in light of your ruling about the flag. As I understand the ruling right now, based on your order, if it can't be a comparator, I think they're not allowed to argue that the chief or the city could do anything about it. But according to the order, as you've left it, that they can introduce the flag to bolster the claim that McCarthy and others at the Greenfield Police Department harbored racial animus. So as I understand the ruling, the fact that McCarthy, a garage that McCarthy owned, had a flag hanging in the back of it, the jury will be told they can infer that there's a racial animus on the part of McCarthy and others. The fact that the Confederate flag, especially in 2015 at this time, in doing the research, 57% of the country did not think it was racial. It was a symbol of racial hatred. Further, in the Bulwar case, it does not stand for the proposition that they describe it as white supremacist literature in the break room of Mount Auburn Hospital, that shows anything about anybody. In that case, what they say is the fact that the employee complained about it and the hospital did nothing about it. They said at least get some over summary judgment. They did not rule admissibility, but it was exactly sort of what they proposed to do here. That in that case, the very employee complained and the hospital refused to remove it. You have excluded that from here because we didn't have the power to do it. Number two, he didn't complain. So now we're in a situation where people such as Sergeant McCarthy, exercising a valid First Amendment right, a court is going to say you can still find that they're bigots. So if I have a Luger in my house or a learned judge trying the Greinader case, Dr. Greinader, who was accused of murdering his wife, had a copy of Mein Kampf, personally signed by Adolf Hitler, and other Nazi paraphernalia in his house. It was excluded by the court as being too inflammatory, that they couldn't put in there that he was somehow a Nazi. Here, what you've allowed them to do is to introduce the flag and argue that means that McCarthy's a racist. So how do I rebut it? Since we can't get into the public controversy, I don't want to get into the fact that he did remove it immediately and all this stuff. Do we bring in people to say it's not a symbol of hate to many, many Americans? There was a debate which intensified, it so happens, in 2015 with that horrific church shooting, right in that time, where the views about the flag started shifting. Do I have to get into that? I'm reading, if you know, Facing History and Ourselves, which I've participated in. I've participated in a lot of civil rights stuff in my time, a lot of protests, and the notion that somebody having a Confederate flag inside the back of the garage, from that, you can make the inference that McCarthy has racial animus, not the decision maker. And so that's what we've done. So what I suggest is, Your Honor, I don't expect you to allow the motion. You may deny it, but not to allow it at this point, is that I will brief it. We will brief it to you. But this is a very serious problem that has been injected into this case, which is really, it's inflammatory. It has no probative value. None. And for the defense to figure out how to deal with it is frankly impossible, unless we want to open up this court to the debate as to what, in 2015, what the Confederate flag meant to various people.
All right, thank you. You can respond.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, it's not about Attorney Keston or myself and our relative respective personal histories. It's about the evidence in this case. Nobody has called Mr. McCarthy a racist. We're not going to label him a racist. But it is evidence of a racial bias, of a bias against people of the African-American background. By 2015, and we can produce any kind of study you want, by 2015 we had the church shooting in Charlestown, we had the Ferguson, Missouri issue. There were a lot of issues in which it was clear that the Confederate flag was a symbol of hate. It didn't arrive in the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, the Confederate flag, what it stood for, goes back to the beginning. And so it is fairly in the case. You have limited just to Mr. McCarthy. You have not, you said we can't argue that the department had it, but this person who was a person within the department, a person high up in the department, it is relevant as to his view, as to how he acted, as to how he prompted that first complaint. And so it's absolutely admissible. It's a piece of evidence, nothing more, nothing less.
All right, Attorney McDonald, you wish to be heard.
Yes, Your Honor. The complaint, the positive thank you was spun into a negative.
I'm sorry, what?
The positive thank you from the motorist's mother was turned into a negative when McCarthy held the information. He is patient zero, so to speak, for this disciplinary process. That's, we argue, the pretextual justification for racially biased adverse actions against him is directly relevant, and the defendants have offered reasons and explanations in the evidence. The Dukes of Hazzard basis, that's their basis. And he held it up for 3 years. We have evidence that it stayed up after those incendiary events for 3 years. Steadfastly, he stood by the flag, and that's relevant for this case. And we had no notice of this motion, not even in passing this morning. All the procedural rules, again, in another motion by the defendants have been violated. This should be dismissed or denied.
Okay. Very well. You wish to file a brief, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor, I think
Okay.
that's a fair way to do it.
All right, so plaintiff to file brief.
Defendant, Your Honor.
Pardon me, I apologize.
They could join.
Defendant to file brief by tomorrow morning. All right. April 14th, 9 a.m. Plaintiff, that is to say file and serve. Okay, plaintiff to file and serve your opposition, since we now have a 4-day break on the 19th at 9 o'clock. And we're going to move forward in the interim.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor.
Yes.
I mean, if we're going to do this on Tuesday, could we have some more time? And we're still in the middle of this trial to file ours.
No. I'm not going to impose upon counsel on their holiday weekend, nor would I impose upon you for that purpose. This is a motion for mistrial that you have raised. These are not issues that haven't already been articulated in this case, and they have been briefed already in this case. So I'll tell you what, you could do it by the tomorrow in the afternoon. That doesn't make a difference. So let's say by 4 p.m. All right.
And again, I asked for clarification purposes. Is the flag in? Are you allowing the flag in only to show that McCarthy might have a racial animus, or is it others? Because your order says and others.
Let me see the order. Counsel stated that I may make findings that McCarthy is a bigot, that I may inform the jury that they may consider that he's a bigot. I have no intention of doing that, and I don't know where you would even draw that from. But
The flag, you've allowed the flag in to show racial animus. I call that bigotry.
But that's, I will not be instructing this jury that the flag may be considered as racial animus. Those words won't come from my mouth, okay?
So what is it? So are
That
they allowed
comes
to
from
argue?
counsel. That comes from counsel, not from me. That comes from counsel, not from the judge. Right, so,
Well, I think you're allowing it only because you have determined that the flag is a symbol of hate.
my rule, yes, indeed, that is what I have found, okay? But I certainly will not be instructing this jury as to how they are to construe the Confederate flag that was displayed in Sergeant McCarthy's premises. That's simply for counsel. Let me turn to this because I do want to bring the jury in. We're going to get started. Okay. I'm looking for number 74.
It's there.
Oh, here it is.
It's the first paragraph.
Got it. Thank you. It's actually not the first paragraph, but in any event. Okay. So, the order says here, plaintiffs seek to introduce evidence of the subject Confederate flag, both to bolster their claim that McCarthy and others at the Greenfield Police Department harbored racial animus, as well as to impeach McCarthy's testimony regarding who hung the flag. And it is the word "and others" that you have focused on. That was drawn, I believe, from your motion. I take it that is to say from your opposition. Is that correct?
Your Honor, it would be under the jury instructions we're putting in.
I'm not talking about jury instructions.
But it would be to the attributional, that you can attribute it to others.
No, my question was direct. That language "and others" was drawn from your opposition to this motion. Am I correct? If not, I'll pull out your opposition and I'll find it.
If Your Honor, if you said you wrote the, yeah, I guess so.
I'll look for it. All right. Bear with me a brief moment. No. Hold on. All right, I'm looking at your joint opposition. It's about 20 pages, so I haven't gone through the whole thing. And truly, I'm looking for your direction since it was your opposition, rather. Okay, but I will consider modifying the order to strike the word "and others," unless you can point to where you requested that, and then bolster your claim. If you're not seeking that it relate to you and others, then fair enough.
Your Honor, and I didn't know this was coming up this morning. You gave them a briefing schedule for tomorrow. We're not going to consider it again till.
I'd like an answer to my question now. Are you seeking that the Confederate flag be introduced to bolster the claim that others harbored racial animus, or just as to McCarthy?
Your Honor, right now, I think the evidence would show just McCarthy.
Okay.
With all
right.
due respect.
Fair enough then. Bear with me a moment then. Okay. This won't eliminate the motion for mistrial, but it will shape it better. Okay. And indeed, that did come from the plaintiffs at some point, but in any event, one moment.
Yeah, Your Honor, we found it. It's the exact language.
Where is it?
Page what?
Your Honor, it's on page 16
Of what?
of the plaintiff's opposition to
Joint opposition?
the plaintiff's opposition to the defendant's motion in limine. And I'll
Just
tell
to
you
be
what.
clear, is the title plaintiff's joint opposition?
We're looking, Your Honor.
Yes,
Okay.
Yes.
number
Joint opposition.
59.
Okay.
Well, I don't know if that's right. Let's go somebody for 59.
All right. Page 16. Okay. And where on page 16?
It's towards the bottom of the page. Hold on one second.
Oh, he and others.
Yep.
That's where this came from. Okay. One moment. That clarification is fair enough. Okay. But bear with me a moment. The appeals court is going to have a heyday with my endorsements on this, but that's all up to you all. Right, to be clear, then looking at my order, okay, is there an agreement to delete the word "and others"? Let me just find it here. Okay. Where I say plaintiffs seek to induce evidence of the subject Confederate flag, both to bolster their claim that McCarthy and others. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer a limiting instruction that the jury is to consider the Confederate flag only insofar as it may relate to Sergeant McCarthy.
And if you would also, the other words are at the Greenfield Police Department. Should be stricken.
And others at the Greenfield Police Department. Yes. Okay. Is that agreed upon?
Your Honor, unless additional evidence comes in, and I don't know that it will, yeah, I'm not
I
going to
respect that. Then, yeah.
Yeah.
I understand that. Okay. All right. Chris just looked around, will be happy to make copies of this expanded endorsement. This is what it says. After oral argument, the defendant's motion for mistrial, which will be briefed by counsel, the parties agree, quote, and others at the Greenfield Police Department is struck from my April 8, 2022 order, page 2. I will offer a limiting instruction that the jury is to consider evidence relating to the Confederate flag only as it may relate to Dan McCarthy. Yes.
Just so I'm clear, I'm not agreeing to the whole concept.
I understand that.
I know, it's just that the parties agree. I just want to make sure that
No, you
it's
agree
clear.
to strike the language. It's the
I'm
parties
just- I
agree,
understand.
quote, and others at the Greenfield Police Department is struck. That's the agreement, am I correct?
Well,
To strike that language.
they've agreed to take it out. I disagree with the whole notion. I just want to be clear that I'm not
understand
agreeing that this is okay with me.
I understand that. That's not what the record reflects. The record simply reflects, quite mechanically, that those few words are deleted from the order.
That's fine with me.
That's it. No more. Okay. All right. Very well. Anything else before we bring the jury in? Okay. And Melissa, at some point, maybe during the break, if you can make a copy of this for the lawyers.
Yes.
And here is this. Okay. All right. I think we're ready for the jury. Okay.
Do you have binder 1, book 1?
Have counsel taken care to correct the tabs?
Yes, Your Honor.
It's a work in progress, Your Honor, but it should be much smoother today.
That's fine.
Although,
Mr. Buchanan, while we're waiting, thank you for your patience. You can come on back up.
you said that you were going to give us 45 and 46.
I took one to Buchanan. This is the first section of that.
Okay, so it's going to be duplicative as 45.
And then for the top, I removed
You have a 25-page document,
which I released.
and you said you were going to print it out for us and give it to us. You didn't?
Michael, do you have the contested?
Hey, Melissa.
Okay.
What? Feel free to give Mr. Buchanan one of the binders if you wish.
Yes, it's right here, but the witness doesn't get those are in evidence.
Jury Andrew.
This is the contested.
Hampshire County Superior Court is now in session. Please proceed.
Great, thank you, Officer DeRoche. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you had a pleasant afternoon yesterday. Welcome back. Has anything come to your attention which has affected your abilities to remain fair, to remain impartial? Seeing and hearing no affirmative responses. Ladies and gentlemen, there are many things that happen during the course of a trial that require my discussion with counsel while you are not in the room. Those happen for a very good reason, but please understand, as I preliminarily instructed you, that those discussions, whether they be at sidebar or when you're outside of the courtroom are conducted not to keep secrets from you, but just to make sure that the evidence which is presented is done so in a manner which is fair and orderly. And so I can just simply tell you that counsel and I have been working dutifully since 9 o'clock this morning. I do greatly appreciate your patience. Since that time, we'll proceed to just about 11. We'll take our mid-morning break, then go through to 1. All right? You may resume the direct examination of Mr. Buchanan, who remains under oath.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
You were an active member of the police department for how many years?
Approximately 22 years.
And the department has approximately how many officers during the time period that you were there?
It fluctuated, but we had a 30 to 35 sworn.
And what was your relationship with your colleagues?
Some close to this very day. But especially those that were working the shift with me. On third shift, we would often, break bread together. I love to cook, so I'd schedule shift meals in the overnight, bring in food, make barbecue, stuff like that.
And you used the term once, shift miss?
Yeah, we had developed this term called shift miss dinner, and it had to do with Thanksgiving and Christmas. I would cook up I'd roast a turkey or other large animal, and we'd bring it in, and everyone else would bring in some accoutrements, and we would celebrate the holidays with that meal.
And were there any other occasions where you did something with your colleagues that was food-based?
This wasn't necessarily with them. I'm a member of the Franklin County Boat Club in Gill, and every year we do this annual event called Christmas in July, and I'm the rib guy for that. So typically we have to do ribs for anywhere from 150, 175 people, and very often there were leftovers. So we would not know what to do with the leftovers, and a lot of that ended up going to the local fire departments, police departments, etc. And our department was Greenfield was a beneficiary of some of that food.
Hold on.
Mr. Buchanan, do you recognize that document?
I do.
Okay. What is it?
This is the letter the chief gave to me, returning me to patrol service after my provisional appointment ending in February of 2019.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask that this be introduced.
I take it it's not in either of the binders. Am I correct?
It had been under our contested.
So,
Oh,
all right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
regardless, we're not sure as of this moment. I have no objection to the document,
All right, very well.
whether it's duplicative or not.
All right, very well. Do you have an extra copy so that I can see it? Let's then mark the document as exhibit number 6. And what is the date on it, please?
January 17, 2019.
If I can just briefly see it, then we'll hand it back to Mr. Buchanan. Bear with me a moment, please. And you're going to put this up on your...
It's up.
Oh, it's up there. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. We can give that back to Mr. Buchanan. Oh, you have it. Okay, very well. Thank you.
In this letter from the chief, it's a letter to acknowledge his appreciation for your willingness to serve as provisional sergeant,
That's correct.
and you're being returned to the patrol division as of when?
As of February 1st.
Is there anything in this letter that states that your return to the patrol division as an officer is due in part to any failings or omissions committed by you?
No, there is not.
And could you read aloud the last line?
Again, I appreciate you taking on this provisional position, and this letter will be added to your file for consideration in any future supervisory openings.
If we go to Exhibit 1, tab 33.
Thank you. Tab 30.
Yeah.
This book starts at tab 36.
Yes.
Tab 33.
This page is dated when?
4/22/2021.
And what does this page show, sir?
This is a list of the personnel analysis for the candidates for promotion.
Okay. But the period of time that it's looking through is when?
From 1999 to the date that was generated.
And then there's handwritten numbers above the categories?
That's correct.
Okay. And so the individuals who identified on the left are whom?
Those were the candidates for promotion.
That were for the promotional process that ended in January 2021?
That's correct.
Okay. And so with respect to arrest, it has a number 2. What does that signify, sir?
That signifies those numbers up top signify my ranking within this report.
And so for arrest of those 10 officers, you were number 2?
That's correct.
Assistant arrest, what does that involve, sir?
That means the arrest was done with the assistance of another officer. So I was either the backup officer or closely related in the case that resulted in the arrest.
And what is the relevance of booking?
Sometimes the officer that is arresting and or assisting the arrest is not also the booking officer. So that delineates who actually did the booking in that particular for that particular arrest, for any given arrest.
Going over to the far left, incidents. What falls under the category, sir, of incidents?
Incidents were reports that did not result in an arrest. For example, an incident report would be generated if we took a report for a breaking and entering that we had not generated a suspect or for yet. So it could be B&Es, it could be nonviolent domestic arguments, it could be any number of police actions that required more than just a paragraph narrative that would have been in the call log, you know.
And then there's a category for citations. What is that, sir?
Those are motor vehicle citations.
Issued by the officer.
Issued by the officer, yes.
In the category next to it, an accident, what is recorded there? What's
accidents are literally accident reports that resulted in the generation of an official accident report. It meant that it was more than a minor accident, where we would have just facilitated a paper exchange of information between the involved parties.
And then if we go to skip the next page and go to page 3 of the document of this exhibit, it looks like there's another document showing up.
Page 3, you said?
The third page of this document.
Yes.
Okay. What document are we looking at here?
Give me a moment, sir. These appear to be either inactive officers or non-sworn personnel.
Look at the last 3 pages. Look at this document.
Oh, the last 3 pages.
Well, just review the whole document.
Okay. Okay. I see. Yeah. Those are the entire. Those are the numbers for the entire department, and not just the promotional candidates.
And if you look at the last page, the last person named is whom?
On the last page, the last person named is Todd Dodge.
Okay. If you look at the arrest, what number is he at?
1,648 arrests, which would rank him number 1.
If we follow that column down or back up the page, is it in descending order?
It appears to be, yes. Well, yeah, ascending order.
Well, as you go backwards, it's descending.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. Yes.
And so Dodge is first for total arrests in this time frame by the Greenfield PD.
Correct.
And how many of the individuals on this last page were still with the department as of January 1, 2021?
With respect to page 6 of this report,
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay. So there were 4 people who were on this page who were still with the department.
That's correct.
Okay. But they still carried the stats for these other people who had left.
That's correct.
And then if we go back one more page, this identifies whom?
Myself and Chris Green.
Okay. And then if we go back to the following page, this identifies whom?
It would appear to be the entire roster for the department.
And again, in descending order in terms of number of arrests.
That's correct.
And so if 4 of the people listed on page, if there were only 4 people on page 6 still there. Was Chris Green still there in January 2021?
Yes, he was.
Okay. And so does that mean that you were, as of January 2021, number 6 in the department for arrest? This is on page 5.
Yes, that appears to be correct.
Did anyone ever compliment you on your productivity that you were number 6 for this time period in the department?
No, sir.
If I can, do you have the other book in front of you?
I do. I have it here.
If I can turn your attention to Exhibit 4, tab 41.
Is this okay, Your Honor?
Yeah.
You copy again, sir?
If I can direct your attention to it.
To
Tab 41 in Exhibit 4 in that book.
My agreement should pull those first 3 pages out of there.
Laura, could we just, housekeeping issue?
Do you want to be seen in the sidebar?
Yeah, just.
Yeah.
Before I go removing pages from the exhibit, in tab 41, the first 3 pages were notes from Attorney Rowley that don't belong. I'd like to remove them.
By agreement?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
We can take care of that right now.
Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Buchanan, if I could just take the first 3 pages out of here. And then you can close that off. Thanks. Take a moment to look through these records, sir. Do these appear to be annual stat records for total arrest? Broken down by person?
That's correct, yes.
And so it's 2 pages per year?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so the first page is 2010?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. And it shows total arrest of 1297?
That's correct.
And if we go to 2018, that shows total arrests of 442 for the year. Yes.
That is correct.
Okay. And if you just turn 2 more pages, what are the results or 3 more pages, what are the results for 2019?
Uh, 379.
Total arrests.
Correct.
Okay. And 2019 was pre-COVID, correct?
Yes. Yes, it was.
Do these stats suggest that the police department wasn't working?
No.
Okay. Why not?
Because the number of arrests, citations, incidents are only a reflection on what we're called to do. If a police department is doing a good job policing, you would expect those numbers to go down. You would expect crime to go down, and I believe that that's what this represents.
Was there also some change within the policies of the department as to when to arrest?
With respect to COVID, or
No, pre-COVID, sir. Between 2010 and 2018 and 2019.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Did COVID impact the operations of the department?
It did.
And how did that happen?
We were it changed a lot. We had to mask up before going into residences. If we were going to be going into someone's house, it was preferred that only one officer go in. We had a reduction in things like motor vehicle stops by virtue of not trying to minimize the exposure to everyone in the department. We had a change of protocol. Coming into the building, you had to sanitize before coming into the building. You had to only enter through one rear door. Had to wash your hands before you came in. There were a number of changes.
During the time frame from 2010 to present, when there's a steady reduction in the number of arrests, were there any directives from anyone in the higher-ups, whether it's a chief, whether it's a lieutenant or a supervisor, that you had to do more in terms of productivity?
No.
Okay. Are there any quotas for arrests?
No.
Have there ever been quotas for issuing tickets or citations?
No.
Were 2 individuals promoted to provisional sergeant in 2020?
Provisional sergeant?
Yes.
I don't know the answer to that question as I sit here.
Was Detective Clark promoted to provisional sergeant?
Yeah, that refreshes my memory. Yes, both Detective Clark and Officer Christopher Rowell were appointed to the provisional positions.
And what was the process that you were aware of for that appointment?
You had to submit a letter of interest.
Okay. Did you submit a letter of interest to the chief?
I did.
Okay. And did the chief talk to you with respect to your letter of interest?
If he did, I don't remember the conversation.
You don't recall the chief getting back to you with respect to your letter of interest?
No.
Was there any rule that said senior officers got priority?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. Was Clark senior to you?
Both Clark and Rowell were senior to me.
Was there a promotional process in 2020 2021 for full time or for a full position of sergeant.
Yes, there was.
Okay. And how many officers were promoted?
A total of 4 officers were promoted.
And what's your best recollection as to the number of officers who applied?
I believe there were 10 officers that applied.
And was this promotional process governed by a civil service test?
It was not, no.
Okay, and why not?
But by that point, the police department had removed itself from civil service.
Was there a written exam with respect to this promotional process?
No, there was not.
Were you involved in any meetings with any member of the department with respect to this promotional process?
Outside of an oral board with the police commission, no.
In Greenfield, it's called the Public Safety.
Public Safety Commission, yes.
Did you have any conversation with Chief Haig with respect to this promotional process?
Not really. The only conversation, he made a comment after to me after my oral board.
Okay, and what was that conversation?
He said that you did a good job.
And where was that? Where did this discussion take place?
As we were walking away from the room that the interviews were being held in, he was walking down to get the next candidate for the interview, and I was walking, out the station because, again, during COVID, we were only allowed to use certain paths in the station. So,
Exhibit 1, tab 31. Yes, Mr. Lawrence. Yeah. Do you recognize this document, sir?
yes, sir.
And it's a letter to you,
It is.
and it's dated when?
December 1st, 2020.
And it's with respect to the promotional process?
That's correct.
And the intermediate pages are the scores that you received from the members of the Public Safety Commission or the...
That's correct.
If we go to the last page of this document, there's 3 scoring components in this last page.
That's correct.
Okay. And what's your memory as to the promotional scoring guide? What weight it was given?
I believe it was either 10 or 20%.
Okay. And what was the Public Safety Committee's oral interview?
Again, 20%. No. I don't recall.
If I suggested to you 40, does that sound correct?
Yes, it does.
Does that refresh your memory?
Yes, it does. The overall component was 20, 40, 40.
Okay. And so what was the 20%? I believe the 20% was the
promotional scoring guide.
Okay. And 40% would have been the oral interview,
Correct.
and 40% the chief's assessment?
Correct.
And based on this, you were ranked what overall?
5th.
The chief's assessment of you is what out of 10 candidates?
I'm ranked 8th.
Okay. Is there a 10th?
There isn't.
Okay. Is there a tie somewhere in there?
Yeah, there's a tie between Officer Cloutier and Officer Purrington.
So how many people are ranked below you by the chief?
1.
Were promotions made off this list?
They were, yes.
And who, going over to the column for overall score, was selected?
Todd Clark, Christopher Green, Megan Cloutier, and Christopher Rowell.
And Mr. Rowell had an overall score, right? An overall ranking of what?
6th.
Okay. So he was below you.
Correct.
Okay. Did you have a conversation with the chief at some point as to the process and where you ranked?
No.
Did the chief ever solicit your input as to your views on the department and why you wanted to be or felt you should be promoted?
No.
And during this time, 2020, you were working what shift generally?
The 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift.
Okay. You were back in as a uniform patrol?
Correct.
Okay. And when you were just a patrol officer, did you do kind of the flex shift, or was it just the...
I would typically just be on one shift as a patrol officer.
If we can go to tab 32, which is the next page, give it one, tab 32. And just, Mr. Buchanan, if you would just go through the book and make sure that there's 10 different scores there.
There are actually more than 10 I see here.
Your Honor, can I have that book, sir? Can we go to sidebar?
Sure. Okay, what is it?
Your Honor, it's just, and I should have brought it up earlier and I forgot, but as he was doing it, and I realized it last night, there are extra pages.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
There's extra pages in here. So there's a lot of duplicates. It said at 10, there was 18 when I did mine last night. So there might be as many as 18 in here. And with the,
It's just duplicates, though.
yeah. So could we pull those out so there's
Yeah,
just 10?
yeah.
Just keep what you pulled out so we can see it.
Yeah, Erica and I will do it right now.
Yeah, I'm not going to mark them for ID purposes, though.
No, we're just going
Unless
to
someone
remove
wants
it.
me to, but it seems to me you're going to agree to
You
take out
really
duplicates.
We just want to check and we'll agree to.
Yeah, why don't you take a moment and do that?
Ladies and gentlemen, feel free to stand up and stretch off counsel. Handle some administrative matters.
Someone just take out the whole thing.
Yeah. So I got Buchanan, Megan Cloutier.
You're welcome. Let's proceed.
So there's 10 documents in that exhibit, or tab, I should say, sir, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're page 1?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you have a total score by the chief of what?
54.
Okay. And there's a bunch of categories that he's graded you on?
That's correct.
Okay. And again, did you have any conversation with the chief with respect to any of these grades?
No.
The next page is Detective Clark,
That's correct.
and he scored at 80.
That's correct.
If I can turn your attention down the several pages down to Cody Gilboa.
Yes.
He's at a 67.
That's correct.
And did he ever perform any time as a provisional appointee above the rank of patrol officer?
I don't believe so, sir. No.
And then if we go to the last page, that's who?
Chad Sumner,
Okay. And he scored at what?
a 50.
Okay. Is there anyone else in that group that you saw who scored below a 70?
Other than Cody and myself, no. Well, Cody, myself, and I'm sorry, Officer Gilbo, myself, and Officer Sumner.
Did you have any discussion in this promotional process with anyone within the supervisory staff with respect to your attitudes towards the department and police work?
No.
Did you ever receive any documentation, any notices with respect to your attendance records?
No.
Okay. Did you ever have a discussion with anyone about attendance in the department?
I did.
Okay. And what was that discussion?
I spoke with Lieutenant, now retired Burge, who had explained to me verbally that I had used over the past year a lot of sick time.
And did he quantify how much sick time?
I believe it was 12 days.
And does the contract provide, because you're under a contract, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Does the contract provide a set number of sick days?
It does.
Okay. And what does that provide?
I believe it's either 10 or 12 days a year, but they accrue indefinitely.
So the longer you're there, the more sick days you accrue.
Potentially, yes.
If you don't use it.
That's correct. And
if you were to retire or leave employment with the department, what happens to those sick days?
For myself and a number of the older officers, where this two-tiered issue with sick time. For the older officers, you are paid out based upon either a 20 or 25% of the value of that sick time when you retire. So any sick time that you have, you get 20 to 25%. If your hours go over a certain threshold, then it's 25%. For the new hires, the contract simply, I believe, reads it's a flat amount that is the maximum, the cap that you can get out of your sick time.
The next item is nature of reprimands or disciplinary measures. Correct?
Yes.
And you've got a 6?
Yes.
Could you turn to the next page and state out loud what Detective Clark had for a score for nature of reprimands and disciplinary issues?
A 6.
Work ethic and initiative. What was your score?
A 4.
And as of that time, where were you on the department stats for total arrest career-wise?
I believe I don't remember the exact number as we sit here now, but it was pretty high, like 5th or 6th or 7th or 8th, something like that.
Leadership qualities. Were there ever any courses offered by the department to you with respect to leadership?
No.
Were there ever any seminars provided by them with respect to leadership?
No.
When you were a provisional sergeant for 16 months, did they provide any training to you as to how to be and work as a provisional sergeant?
Very minimal. I received a binder, not quite as thick as any of these, with some very basic supervisory information from Lieutenant Burge.
Was there any further discussion with any member of the supervisory staff as to how you do the work?
It was no. I shadowed with some existing sergeants and sort of just thrown to the wolves and do the best you can.
There's a column there for supervisory evaluation of job performance, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Have you ever received an evaluation, a written evaluation of you by any supervisor?
Yes.
When?
The last one, I believe, was 2006.
from 2007 to 2020, have you received any written evaluations from any supervisor as to your job performance?
No.
Promotional potential, you're rated at a 4?
Yes.
Okay. Did anyone ever tell you why you got a 4 for promotional potential?
No.
Okay. Do you have any idea what the metric is to be promotable versus non-promotable?
No.
Okay. If this was under civil service, would there have been a remedy through a process through that?
There might have been a different remedy, yes.
Outside, as it's
Objection, move to strike.
Sustained. The last response is struck from the record. Is not to be considered as evidence. Okay, you may pose another question.
Thank you, Your Honor. When the final promotions were done, you were not promoted.
That's correct.
Okay. What was your reaction?
I was really upset. However, based on the history of the last 5 years, wasn't surprised at all.
Did you have any conversations with anyone inside the department?
I did with some of the officers that I was close with.
Anyone within the rank of sergeant or above?
No.
And did you have any discussions with the chief or the deputy chief?
No.
In March 2021, did you sustain an injury?
I did.
And what happened, sir?
We responded to a call for a domestic argument. There was
Who's we?
myself, Officer Rowell, and I forgot who the other officer was that was present there. But it was primarily myself and Officer Rowell, and she's a new officer. But there was a third officer there, at least initially.
And how did you get injured?
We were trying to keep these two parties apart that had this domestic argument. There was probable cause to arrest the male that was involved. The female had complained that the male party had grabbed a hold of her forearm, and she had an open abscess on her forearm and squeezed it to punish her in this argument. She was in the ambulance being treated, and once she discovered that we were going to be taking her partner into custody, she tried to intervene, and I tried to control her from intervening with the arrest. In doing so, I had grabbed a hold of her, and she twisted and pulled my arm back, and I ended up tearing the distal bicep tendon. There was a partial tear there on my distal bicep.
And did you treat with medical people with respect to that?
Yes.
Okay. And who did you treat with?
Jeff King was my primary PT therapist. The initial consult was with Dr.
Up in Greenfield?
Yeah,
Dr.
Hare. Yes, thank you. And I also saw another specialist in Springfield.
And what was the course of treatment for the injury, sir?
at first, the first month or two was just rest to really be able to evaluate what the damage was, and then physical therapy a couple times a week in office and then at home also.
And is the arm back to 100%?
I wouldn't say 100%, but I'm doing all my normal stuff. I'm not confident that it would stand up to the rigors of performing that task again. And
was surgery an option?
that was a possibility. Yes, it was an option.
Did you ever pursue surgery?
No, I did not.
And did you go back to work after that injury, sir?
No, I did not.
And was the department aware of your status?
They were.
And were you paid during this time that you were out?
I was.
And paid by the department?
I was.
Your normal salary?
That's correct.
You retired, sir.
I am.
Okay. When did you retire?
November 2nd, 2021.
Why did you retire?
There are a number of reasons, but the
Take your time, sir.
like I'm sorry. I really love this job. But with the injury and the other, everything that was going on in the background, I just didn't have it in me to move on. I gave it all I got, and I'm sorry. I don't.
Take your time.
I'm sorry. Forgive me. I guess with the injury, it's tough realizing that you're, in your mid-50s and, maybe you're just too old for this. And that was one of the considerations. The other consideration is, try as I might to get promoted or to figure out what I needed to do to get promoted, or I just couldn't ever seem to get any traction. And for a long time, I didn't understand why. I simply didn't understand why. When I was at work, I tried to be as careful and as thoughtful a police officer as I could. Obviously, as a police officer, you're not going to please everyone all the time, and there are going to be folks out there that are going to vilify you no matter what you do. But I love this job. I have been given the MAD Award, which is an award for OUI enforcement. I've had case law that was made out of some of my cases. I love the challenge of the job, both the interpersonal and this intellectual piece where you're dealing with crimes and elements, as the judge had described at the opening. I love doing this stuff, but certainly over the last few years, I was repeatedly reminded in a very indirect way that, oh no, I guess we don't value what you have to contribute. So, that was also part of the matrix for me, deciding that, okay, that's just enough. That's just enough. I gotta move on.
As a retired police officer, do you receive
Thank you.
a retirement benefit?
I do.
And how is retirement benefit calculated for the purposes of retirement as a police officer?
Okay. So with respect to the retirement benefit, it's a percentage of your best 3 years. And that flat percentage is based upon how old you are and how many years of service you have. So, and starting at age 40, if you had 20 years on at age 40, the age factor that would kick in would be 1.0. And it goes up by 0.1% for every year until you're 55. So at 55, your factor is 2.5. And so in my particular case, I had 27 years in almost 28, and I was 54 years old. So my multiplication factor was 2.4 times 28 years, if that makes sense. And so that's how it's calculated. It maxes out at 80%. You can never make more than 80% of your best 3 years.
And what percentage, sir, did you retire at?
About 67%.
And you spoke of 27 years. You were with the department for
22. Prior to that, I was at UMass as a PSO1, PSO2, and dispatcher.
And how long would you have had to stay with the Greenfield Police to reach full retirement?
57, 58 years.
And as of November 2021, how many more years would you have to have stayed?
Approximately 4.5.
Is there a pay differential between sergeants and patrol officers?
Yes, there is.
Okay. And have you, in connection with this case, reviewed the pay differential from 2015 to date?
Yes.
Okay. And what did you do, sir, to make this calculation?
I requested from Human Resources all the payroll information for the period in question, and then did somewhat of a comparative analysis of what I got paid and what I would have gotten paid had I been promoted.
Sidebar.
Are you going to have an accountant, an economist, anyone else testify as to these damages?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. The objection.
It's the subject of expert testimony.
I'm sorry, can you hear you?
This is clearly the subject of expert testimony. They can't call him as an expert suddenly. He's never identified as an expert.
Okay.
Your Honor, I have a work product that I've shared with my brother where he's actually gone through the records.
I'm sure he has.
Yeah.
But you know, the objection is that he is not competent to testify as to issues pertaining to, I guess it's just back pay that he's seeking. Okay. All right. Do you have any case law that you can establish for me that he can testify as to what his back pay is?
I can get it for you. I don't have it right now, Your Honor. No.
Let's move on to a different topic. Okay. And then we'll take a break, and I'll take a look at it as well. Do you have anything to offer me? I mean, typically this is borne out by expert testimony. There's no question about that. Whether or not it might come in is something that I need to hear from counsel on. So we're going to move forward to a different subject matter. I think you have plenty else to explore with them.
Your Honor, the next issue would be his retirement calculation.
Well, that's even more problematic, it seems to me.
Yes.
Okay, so reduction in present day value, that sort of thing. I mean, there's not going to be any of that, I take it.
We do have a present day calculation, Your Honor.
And that he did on his own?
Yes, Your Honor.
We asked jurors to do that, which always defied me, but having said all that, so you don't have any level of expert testimony as to any of his wage and retirement damages?
No, Your Honor. I think he can calculate it, too.
Now's probably a good time then for us to take our mid-morning break. I'll invite you both to present to me your argument as to whether or not this should come in, but I see this as highly problematic. All right. And I'll hear from you further at that time. Anything that you wish to say at this point in time?
Well, just on this point, I mean, I ran into this in one of the case, and basically they put in the pay, and the jury conceptually do it, but I suggest that the plaintiff cannot make it something express.
I mean, that's the thing. Certainly, you can get in numbers, okay? You can get in, this is what I was making, this is what I made when I was provisional sergeant, okay? We do call upon jurors to reduce to present day value, which, once again, I will simply articulate. That is something that defies my logic. But as to what the quantum of his lost wages are, okay?
Just back pay, Your Honor.
I got that. Yeah. Is possibly problematic. We'll take a break. I'll take a look at it as well. And I'll invite the two of you to to talk as to possibly having an understanding as to what he can testify as to and what the parameters are of his testimony. I mean, certainly he can talk some hard numbers, and we'll see where it goes from there. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our mid-morning break just a little bit early with the ongoing instruction not to discuss the case with anyone, including amongst yourselves, nor to do any investigation or research or look at any media reports in this case. I should have mentioned earlier, you're always free to come in if you've got some sort of soft drink or water. We permit you to have that with you here in court. I'll see you in just about 20 minutes or so. Okay, thank you. All right, counsel, please attend to that issue. I myself will do so, and I'll see you in 20 minutes. Thank you all.
Did you hear about this?
He was just telling me.
Factory farm brewed.
Did you hear what happened in the timber
birds
business?
via ventilation shelter.
The woman ran out, glued herself. It's funny, the announcers first said, oh, one of the crew fell. Wait, they're not getting up.
And when they got up, she just like rushed her out.
But did they rip her skin off?
I don't think she was like really cold.
Well, all rise, please.
All right, welcome back, everybody.
Back in session, may you be seated?
Right, so we are addressing defendant's objection to anticipated testimony that relates to, as I understand, back pay and issues pertaining to a reduction in the retirement benefit.
thus far, there has been evidence that was adduced without objection relative to Mr. Buchanan's pay rate when he was a patrol officer, as well as when he was a provisional sergeant. Okay, I don't know whether or not there was any further testimony as to what the step basis might have been for sergeants, and there has been most recently testimony that when he retired, he was at a certain quantum. At 67%, I believe, was his testimony, and that he would have maxed out a number of years later at a higher percentage, which was 80%. So that's already come in, okay? Just so that I can frame the issue and understand where you're seeking to go with Mr. Buchanan and what the objection is. What further testimony are you hopeful to adduce from Mr. Buchanan relative to these issues?
Your Honor, Mr. Buchanan has prepared 10 pages of analysis showing so page 1, it measures pay period.
Well, let me just ask you first a threshold question. Has this been shared with counsel?
It has, Your Honor.
When?
It's in the answers to interrogatories, and I believe it has been shared. The answer to interrogatory, Your Honor, says $88,000.
Okay, can I see this, please?
Sure.
That's what you sent us this morning.
No, this is. I'll give you
Okay.
a copy.
Are you seeking to introduce this document
Your
into
Honor,
evidence?
I could have him testify as to the computations he's done.
Wait a second. Longevity table? Longevity? Is there a life span table that you're sequing to introduce?
No, Your Honor, this is back pay.
Right.
So what it shows
what
is-
does longevity then mean?
It's a benefit to officers within the department that Mr. Buchanan would have qualified for, or did qualify for, as of that time.
Okay. And then incentive? What is that? I'll
That's
get to
the
it in a moment.
education incentive, Your
I'm
Honor.
trying to find out where we got this. When?
Today, right now, I don't know. I believe it was sent to you.
Well-
I don't believe it was.
Well, that's an important issue.
It's a very important issue.
And so let's just back this up before I dive into the substance of the proposed evidence. First is an issue relative to whether or not this discovery, as it were, was timely produced. Counsel has indicated that it was included in your answers to interrogatories years ago.
No, Your Honor, it was a supplemental set of answers to interrogatories that was sent to them on January 12th, 2022. It's item or interrogatory number 6, and he states, based on the differences in pay between...
Just a brief moment. Can you please either share that with counsel, or if counsel has it, that'll be sufficient.
Yeah. Yeah.
This isn't that.
So I
This isn't that.
No, I identified with them and told them the work that he had done, which is the bottom line number.
Well, first, the document is not going to come in. I'll tell you that.
Correct, Your Honor.
Okay. Whether or not the substance of it comes in is now a separate issue. So just to first orient me as to what we're looking at, I'm looking at a multi-page document which appears to have similar entries, but perhaps for different time periods.
He took it from January 25, 15, and so at the top it identifies these are the pay periods I looked at. And the difference for that pay period was $4,208 at the bottom.
You're way ahead of me. I'm still just trying to understand what these documents are. Bear with me a brief moment. Let me just take a look at them. For example, let's do this. Let's staple this one and mark this as A for identification, okay? Thank you. Okay. For example, from pay period number 32, which is identified by date, to pay period 52, which is identified there, he says there were 17 weeks of regular pay and 3 weeks of holiday pay. Okay? And then he has regular patrol was calculated for a total of $12.49. Regular supervisor was calculated as $14.54. Holiday pay, he's got calculated for patrol, and then for supervisor. By supervisor, I take it you mean provisional sergeant?
If he had received a promotion, Your Honor, that's what a supervisor.
Okay, so is that provisional sergeant or sergeant, which I take it as a different pay grade?
It would, I believe this would have been the pay grade of a first step, because he would have been, yeah. It's the same.
Well, there is a lot to back into this. Let me say that in terms of foundational evidence as to what these amounts are or what they reflect and his knowledge of them. Bear with me a brief moment. So it goes down, the difference between the regular pay weeks, the difference between the holiday pay weeks, then there are 17 pay weeks, 3 holiday pay weeks, for total losses of $4,200, which is the aggregate of those two. Then we turn to a different pay period, and Attorney Ryan, why were these pay periods selected?
Your Honor, I believe he will state that these were all of the pay periods from January 15 through his retirement date. That's what this shows. He's tried to do a pay period by pay period examination.
Okay. So that he will testify, and this document is not going to, and I'm certainly going to give you enough time to be heard, Attorney Kessin. You can feel free to stand up and stretch, though, while I'm speaking. Because I appreciate these are the sort of things that are helpful to come in at final trial conference, so that we're not taking all this time, because this is of significance. You anticipate he's going to testify that his salary was $985.10 per week, okay? And I think that's roughly the amount that's in. And that he further had longevity pay and incentive pay that was included with that. Longevity pay of $14.78 per week. Is that correct?
Correct, Your Honor.
Okay. And he will testify that his knowledge as to the longevity and incentive pay derives from where?
His work as a patrolman.
Well, I get that.
But the paychecks that he received.
Okay, they're on his paychecks.
Yes.
Okay. And so that was indeed what he was receiving when he was a patrolman, right?
Yes, sure.
Okay. So let me just stop here. Understanding that this document is not going to come into evidence, however, may be used to refresh his recollection, I suppose, unless he has these numbers off the top of his head. Attorney Keston, as to simply that very first calculation relative to regular patrol pay, will there be an objection?
To him testifying what he made as a patrolman?
Correct.
Year by year, it changes. To that testimony, he can testify what he made. No
correct.
objection.
And that is correct. I mean, certainly a witness can testify as to how much he was making. So that much would come in. The next portion relates to regular supervisor pay. Now, is this the amount that he was making when he was promoted to provisional sergeant on the 2 occasions?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, and thank you. I appreciate that. Attorney Ryan can speak for you, though, since, right, very well. And that includes the longevity incentive. These, I take it, were reflected on his pay stubs for that time period. Is that correct?
Yes, sure.
Okay. That would seem, at least in my mind, to fall under the same category if he can testify what he was making as a provisional sergeant. Certainly mindful that that amount appears to have changed at some point in time, so he would need to lay a foundation as to his understanding as to what those increases were. So will there be an objection in that regard?
Not for the times he actually worked. So there was sometime in January of 15 few days, a week or so.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
So I'm sorry. I never get that. Sometimes
There are
It's
many
usually-
firsts.
it's usually keep it down.
Yeah.
Or you're talking too fast. Those
Yeah,
were
there you
the
go.
two criticisms, among others. In January of 15, certainly, and then for a year and a half later, when he was provisional sergeant, he can testify what he made
Right.
during those times.
Right. I am mindful that there will be plenty of cross-examination as to breaks in, his service, as I presume. Then the other calculations, I'm not going to belabor, but they are holiday pay, which just simply includes a holiday line on both of these. Is that correct?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, and he would testify that he's familiar with that from his own experience, right? Okay, I think that falls under the same category, that is the calculation, okay? And then the difference between regular pay, between his patrol pay and his supervisor's pay is a matter of mathematics. He could testify what the difference is, and the same goes with holiday pay. Okay? Is there going to be any objection to his testifying as such?
To his calculation of the evidence, yeah, I think that is why you call experts, and that is something that it's in evidence. A jury can do it. There's no foundation that's got any expertise in making calculations.
Well, this is simple math. It is and I respect your objection, because ordinarily this would come in through an expert, but the jury doesn't require expert testimony to do a subtraction. Okay, that's within the ken of a jury. And so, for example, the regular supervisor pay at $14.54 minus regular patrol pay at $12.49, that certainly can come in. He can testify as to that, and same goes for the holiday pay. Then, not to be outdone, there were 17 regular pay periods during, so he takes 17 times each of these numbers for regular pay and 3 times whatever the number is for holiday pay. Is that correct?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, he can do that, and then he adds those two together. That's fine. Let me just say this. It's very helpful for us to do this prior to trial, or to give me a heads up at the end of a day, so we don't need to spend, all this time going through all this. And he would testify as to all of this. Okay. Okay. And then on the retirement piece.
Yes, Your Honor. So on the retirement piece, he would testify as to the differential, the 67% versus the 80%
Of what?
of the salary at the top step for a sergeant, Your Honor, which I believe is $107,000. And there's a $2,000 a month differential between what he would have made versus what he is making.
He could testify as to what he is currently earning, okay? And then you want him to testify that as of a certain date, for example, where he maxed out, that he would be getting 80% of whatever the maximum would be.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, and your objection to that?
A veritable plethora. But a really good beginning is he doesn't have a constructive discharge claim. Thus, he cannot recover damages for how he would have maxed out.
Yeah, let me just stop us there. I deny the motion to amend to assert a claim for constructive damages, and it was made clear that he's not seeking any front pay, okay? But yet here you're trying to kind of wedge in front retirement pay.
Your Honor, my brother and I had a discussion about this 2 weeks ago when the ruling came out, and he did say to me at the time, maybe I misunderstood him, but he did say to me at the time that he couldn't get the differential in wages, but there would be a retirement claim. That's what I understood our conversation was.
Well, I'm not going to tie anyone to anything in this case or in general, okay? But if you can just explain to me why an individual might be entitled to a differential, effectively, I'll call it front retirement, when he's not entitled to front pay when he retired. Why would he, if he's retired, there's a hard stop, okay? And, it's been clear, and I respect, as would I expect, that there is no claim for front pay. So then why then would we tell this jury that, well, if he had worked for another 4 years, he would have retired at 80%. So you can consider that, but you can't consider front pay. Why?
Your Honor, with all due respect, he's put in the evidence as to the 13% differential. He's put into the evidence why he left work. The court has the discretion to reconsider its denial of the motion to amend to allow him to calculate and put into evidence the differential.
Is that a verbal motion?
That's a verbal motion, Your
It's
Honor.
denied. Okay, for the reasons I articulated in my decision. He can testify as to his wages, all right? Is there an objection to testimony as to lost opportunity, so to speak, for increased retirement?
Yes. He can testify. He can testify as to what he's getting in retirement.
I just don't see how it's even material to anything because there's no claim for front pay. Okay, and he's retired, and there is no claim for constructive discharge. Okay, I've ruled that out. That motion was filed 7 years too late. Okay, and I'm not revisiting it. Okay, I've ruled on that. Okay,
But respectfully, Your Honor, it wasn't filed 7 years too late. It didn't happen until November 2021.
Oh, okay. Well, then, regardless, it was filed 2 weeks prior to trial.
It was filed a month prior to trial, Your Honor.
Okay, well, I've ruled on it. Yes.
I'm sorry. No, I just was reacting to the re-argument of the motion.
And for
I agree with
example,
you that,
for example, even were Mr. Buchanan to testify as to the lost quantum of retired benefit, for what period of time?
Until he would have maxed out at the 80%, Your Honor. It's approximately, I believe it's 3 years. He testified for it, but I believe it was 3 years away. The quantum is the differential between if he had gone out to full retirement versus what he's receiving. Oh, and then you mean going forward?
Okay. All right. I'll give you the final word here.
I object to revisiting the motion for constructive discharge. In fact, Mr. Buchanan testified today that he doesn't think he can do it physically. I mean, the notion that somehow... So anyway, Your Honor, the retirement, what he's getting, what he would have gotten, anything else, should be out of the case, and their damages are limited to the differential in wages if they can prove that either he would have been promoted in 2015 or in 2019.
Okay, that's correct. To be fair, he testified that, to be honest, he didn't feel that physically that he could do the work and that he had lost the will in light of all respectfully that had occurred. Okay, but I have not permitted a claim for constructive discharge to be asserted at this very, very late date as it relates to front pay. It would be inconsistent for me to permit a claim for an increase in retirement between the 67% and the 80%. Okay, so I'm not going to permit him to testify relative to what his retirement would have been at 80%. Okay. Having said all that, let's bring in the jury.
6 pins. 6 pins. This one's got 4 pins. No, I think this has 4 pins. That has 6 pins. No, 4 pins, 6 pins.
10 pins.
My surgeon was so proud. He goes, nobody else could have fixed it. Nobody else. I've never 6 pins. Nobody else can do it. So, great. So you're going to get bragging rights on my shoulder. The only question I had is how long before I can play hoop? 6 months. 6 months. Miserable. Remember that chair I had to sleep on?
Mr. Buchanan, you can retake this down. And here we can hand this down.
Here, Andrew. Hampshire County Superior Court is back in session. Please be seated.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. As I've asked before, I'll once again pose the question. Has anything come to your attention since I last saw you here in court which has affected your abilities to remain fair, to remain impartial? Hearing no affirmative responses, let's return to the direct examination of Mr. Buchanan.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Buchanan, have you done a computation of what you would have made versus what you did in fact make?
Yes.
Okay. And could you explain what you did and what you considered?
Oh, I obtained from Human Resources copies of all my pay stubs, starting with 2015 to present. And I calculated what I actually made as a patrolman versus what I would have made as a supervisor.
And what was the basis for the supervisor pay?
The basis for the supervisor pay was the first step, sergeant's pay.
Okay. And how did you know what the first step sergeant's pay was?
A number of ways. First, it's part of the contract. It's listed in the contract. And B, it was, at least for this first year, on my pay stub. So that's where I got those numbers from.
And sir, if you don't mind speaking more loudly or into the mic, that would be great. Thank you.
Sorry, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Is there a concept known as, in addition to your salary, do you receive any other benefits that are compensated in a paycheck?
Yes. There are several components to your paycheck. Some of them change, some of them don't. The salary line is the contractual piece that's listed in the contract. I also receive an incentive pay that was virtue of a thing called the Quinn Bill, which paid an educational incentive for obtaining my master's degree. Also, there is a contractual longevity pay, which is it differs as the time goes on as a percentage of your overall pay.
Is there a concept in the what is a pay period?
It's a week, a 7-day period during which we work.
And what's the concept of holiday pay?
Because with police work, you're typically not. You work holidays. You're not given holidays off. Contractually, there was an incentive incorporated in the contract to pay for holiday in addition to your regular pay.
Okay. And are there different rates for patrol officers and sergeants for holiday pay?
The rate is different, but the underlying concept is the same. It's effectively 1 day's pay of whatever level you're at.
Can you, from your memory, recall with specificity the exact pay per pay period?
Not from memory, no.
Do you have in front of you a document that you've previously prepared that sets forth these items?
Yes, I do.
And so from the pay period of January 25, 2015 through 6/20, 2015, what calculation did you do?
I calculated.
Is he reviewing something?
Yes, Your Honor. I'm sorry.
Okay. Why don't I just see Councilor Sedbar? Okay. I have no problem with his reviewing something, but we need to make it clear. Is he looking at A for ID?
He's looking at A for ID, Your Honor.
Okay, very well. I'm inclined to allow that to be marked as a chalk.
Okay.
Okay. And I would consider at the culmination of the trial allowing the chalk to go to the jury so that they don't need to take untoward notes. Okay. So I'll do that. I want to make something clear about the retirement issue. Okay. Because I think that you may have been presenting apples and oranges. Okay. And it wasn't entirely clear, and it's important that this record be clear, okay? You were positing that you wanted to have him testify as to what his pension would be at the sergeant rate at 80%.
Correct, Your Honor.
Okay? And I stated that's not coming in because he left when he was at 67%, okay? I suppose that doesn't mean, however, that he may not have a claim at 67%
For the differential.
for the sergeant rate. But that's not what you asked
Correct, Your
for,
Honor.
okay? And so it was confusing, okay? And so we're going to get through this, and then we're going to revisit that. But my sense is that, as I stated, he can't testify that he would have been 80% because that bus is out of the station, okay? But he might be able to testify certainly that, okay, had he been making a sergeant's pay rate and had he left at 67%, it would have been that much more.
Yes, Your Honor.
You understand the
Yes,
distinction?
I do.
Okay. But we'll address that when it comes back, okay? But I just wanted to raise that issue since it was...
I'm going to address it today.
What?
I'm going to address this today.
Yeah, but first I want to get through this. We're just going to talk about wages right now. Then
Okay.
we'll come in sidebar again. Yeah, I'll see you then.
Page 7B.
Yeah. All right. Why don't you just have him identify the document that has been marked as A for identification purposes, please?
Mr. Buchanan, could you identify that document?
This is a document that just outlines my calculations for the differential in pay.
And once again, if you can approach the mic, I know it's easy to get very comfortable in that chair, but the mic doesn't move. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. It identifies the differential in pay over the period starting with 2015. It's broken down by groupings of pay periods to account for changes in my personal status and also changes in the contractual rate of pay. Also in changes for longevity pay, which changed across contracts. So that's what all these numbers are.
Okay. Now, thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, A for ID is being introduced as to what we refer to as a chalk that harks back to an older day when we literally would permit witnesses such as Mr. Buchanan to use a chalkboard and write down calculations, okay? It's not an exhibit, though. However, I may consider, as I am permitted, to allow the chalk, A for identification as we call it, go into the jury room with you for your deliberations. And were I to do so, it's to save you the time of now having to take what I think are going to be copious notes as to a series of calculations, which you're about to hear testimony as to. Okay? Let's proceed. Yes? Do you have a copy?
No, the whole thing is a chalk? Or just one page?
No, it's multiple pages. Yes, the whole thing.
Can we discuss that another time?
Yeah,
Before
yeah.
the jury sees it.
Why don't we come to sidebar? Let me see the chalk. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. Wait, hold on a sec. Just a brief moment. Okay. So the document is multi-pages, and it appears to be for a number of periods. And what is the objection as to precisely?
I've never seen this before.
Oh,
I mean,
well, that's
I don't even know.
okay. That's fine, and I'll give you an opportunity certainly to review it before your cross-examination.
But before he starts discussing this document, the way you either do an expert disclosure, or if you're going to do calculations, you give it to the other side. This document they never gave us, and on the fly, he's telling the jury what it contains.
All right. I'm going to permit this testimony to continue, and you'll have ample opportunity to review prior to your cross-examination. Let's continue.
Do you have the chart back there? So looking at page 1 of this chart, again, the calculations were based on what?
The actual numbers of represented both on my paycheck and in the contract.
In this first page covers what period of time?
It's from January 25th, the pay period of January 25th, 2015, to the last pay period of the fiscal year, which was 6/20/15.
And the differential that you calculated for lost pay during this period of time was what?
$4,208.02.
In the next pay period, or the next sheet, contains a review of what periods of time?
The first pay period of the new fiscal year started at 6/27/15, and this portion of the analysis runs until 1/9/2016.
And why does it stop at 1/9/2016?
I believe there was a contractual raise that kicked in at the beginning of the year.
And how many weeks of regular pay?
There were 22 regular pay weeks.
And how many weeks of holiday pay?
There were 7 holiday pay weeks.
And what's the total calculations for the differential for that pay period?
2408.72.
At any time during that time frame, had you been serving in a supervisory capacity?
No.
The next sheet is for pay periods from when to when?
From pay period 30 to pay period 52, respectively, 110.16 to 6/12/16.
And how many weeks of regular pay?
29 weeks of regular pay.
And 3 weeks of holiday?
That's correct.
And were there any contract changes in this time frame that you recall?
The base salary in all of the segments we've reviewed for the patrolman changed.
And with respect to the supervisor, you did not have any increase, correct?
There was a change there also.
Okay. And what was it?
In the third period that we're representing here, the base salary for the sergeant changed from $1,146.19 to $1,286.03.
And the differential in that pay period, or these pay periods, was what?
The $7,438.90.
Okay. The next pay periods are from when to when?
Pay period 1, 6/19/16 to pay period 53, 6/18/17.
And based upon your review of the numbers, what was the losses?
$14,021.31.
And then June 2017 to October 7, 2017.
Yes.
And at any time during that time frame were you a supervisor?
No.
Okay. And the calculation for the differential then was what?
$4,939.95.
The next page is for the pay period beginning 10/8/17 through June 23/18, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And so what did you do here?
I accounted for the loss of step increase. So as a supervisor, at the onset of these calculations, there was a beginning step as a supervisor and a final step as a supervisor. This takes that into account, that I was not given the benefit of being at the second step or top step as a supervisor.
And so but you were getting first step supervisor.
Correct.
Okay. And so the differential for this period of time is what?
$3,951.33.
And then the next page deals with pay period from June 24, 2018 to January 26, 2019, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And what work were you doing? What was your status in that period of time?
I was a provisional supervisor.
And so the differential that's indicated here is the differential between what?
The first step supervisor pay versus the top step supervisor pay.
And what's that differential?
The total?
Yes.
$3,371.91.
And then the next period deals with January 25th, 19 through pay period June 28th, 19, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And what was your status during this time frame?
I've been returned to patrol.
And you were calculating it against what?
A top step supervisor.
Okay. And the differential during that period of time added up to what?
$7,831.88.
For the pay period from in FY, so this is the whole of FY 2020, the next?
Correct.
Okay. And what's the basis for this differential?
This is a comparison of what I actually made compared to what I would have made had I been a top step supervisor.
And top step supervisor and a sergeant.
As a sergeant, yes.
And how long does it take to reach top step?
Now, in the current contract, it's a 3-step, 3 tiers to get to the top step. When I started on this journey, it was only 2.
And once you make top step, you stay at the top step?
Correct.
And so the differential for that fiscal year is what?
15.
I'm sorry, please be clear in terms of months and years, since
Yes.
the jury may not understand, nor might I, what the fiscal year is.
So the differential between July 2019 and June 2020, sir?
$15,304.71.
And then the second to the last page calculates pay periods in FY 2021. So the fiscal year begins when?
Roughly July 1, but because of the calendar, sometimes the pay period that we're being paid for accounts for dates in the previous year. But
And this runs through when, sir?
November 2021.
Okay. And that's the last day you worked?
Correct.
Okay. And what's the differential for this period of time?
$25,029.26.
And did you calculate at the back end the total differential during these 82 months?
I did.
Okay, and what was that?
$88,505.99.
Your Honor, I ask that the document be admitted as a chalk.
Objection.
Sidebar.
Well, I've already stated it was a chalk. I'll hear from you. So,
I thought we had discussed this. I need time to digest this. That's my problem.
yeah, I'm gonna.
Just got it today.
Yeah, no, I respect that. I get that. I've already indicated that it was a chalk, and technically things don't need to be admitted as a chalk. Whether or not it goes to the jury remains to be seen. Okay, and you'll have plenty of time to look at it and
All
review
I'm
it.
asking is that the jury not see it.
No, they're not going to. Yeah, no, and it's up in the air whether or not they ever will. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right.
All right, let's continue.
Based on the chalk in front of you,
I object.
Let me see you at sidebar.
With the next few words going to be, do you have an opinion?
Can you calculate
Can you calculate what?
the differential between what he would have made in his current retirement if he had been paid as a sergeant versus the patrol officer?
Okay, well, okay, let's address that issue. He cannot testify as to what his earnings would have been at 80%. Okay, that was the subject matter of my earlier ruling, which is what you were asking. What you are now asking is, can he testify that 67% of whatever the top tier sergeant pay equals dollar value X, right? Does he just know that off the top of his head?
Your Honor, I might have to do it on redirect, actually. You know, which, I mean, he can't do it
Not
now.
if there's no cross. No.
Want to lay out?
Yeah, I was going to say we all.
Oh, there's going to be.
Yeah, we all
But
need a
anyway,
good laugh there.
what I'm
Right?
saying is that this situation should be deferred because we need to look at these numbers and look at all this. He told you and us at the original pre-trial conference that he's only seeking back wages. That's what he said.
Right. Yeah, but what he's
And now he's come up with. Now
Right.
we have you.
I understand that, but whether or not what he said he was looking for pre-trial, I mean, there's a legitimate claim that he's got a loss of retirement benefits. One of my concerns is, for what period of time. There's no life charts here.
Your Honor, we will put in a life chart.
Was this articulated as a lost benefit in the final pretrial conference memorandum?
Your Honor,
We need.
Well, I don't know about the memorandum.
in the interrogatory
I'm getting
answer to my brother.
Okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to pass on this right now, okay? Because to be fair, while certainly it's simple math to say that 67% of whatever stepped-up pay is quantum more, but the next step is for how long a period of time, which is generally borne out by a life expectancy chart, which is simple enough to get in, although if it doesn't come in by way of stipulation, it may not be simple enough to get in. And second of all, the most importantly, there's due process involved. There needs to be some notice that you're seeking a loss in retirement benefits as a result, and that needs to have been somehow articulated, either in an answer to interrogatories. And I'm not going to get into this now because this requires some discussion. But I'm going to ask you to move forward. I'm presuming you've got lots to talk about in terms of emotional distress and treatment, okay? Which is why I'm suggesting we move off of this for the moment, and we'll have our discussion, and then you can return to it.
I just flag an issue.
Sure.
Flag issue is this. He's got 2 promotions he's complaining about, 2 different times.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if he gets promoted,
I know.
I
know, this is
think it was July
complicated.
of 15, then he's got
It's complicated.
yes,
I know that.
and we have various. Dates.
I know that. I know that.
That's
I
so I
know.
knew.
This is a
I knew-
complicated case. We talked about this in terms of the special verdict slip. Okay,
Yes.
I get that, but that doesn't need to be weeded out during examination. Although I'm presuming you're going to have a heyday with that on cross-examination. But yes, this is complicated.
You
Okay,
think I'll have a good cause?
so let's move on because we need to return to this issue relative to
Your Honor, I
retirement.
identified the lost retirement benefits in the answer
We're
to
going to
interrogatory.
return to this so that,
It's there.
well, we're going to return to this.
Okay.
Okay, just a brief moment. We're going to return to this, okay? So let's move on to a different subject matter, okay?
That's when the constructive discharge.
During this process, sir, since 2015, have you had occasions where you experienced emotional reactions?
Yeah.
And could you articulate what some of those reactions have been?
During this period, I've been treated for depression. I have seen myself withdraw because of that depression. I've had panic attacks. There's just this sense of not having control over those things that I once did. This job was my everything for so long, and I thought I understood, the rules of engagement and how to do well, and it's incredibly frustrating when after all that experience you're not able to progress with your career. So I had a really bad panic attack a few years ago, and my wife had to leave work early. My friends had to show up at my house. I didn't know what was going on. It was the first time that it ever happened to me. I lost feeling in my extremities, and if you've ever had one of those, it's just you feel like you're about to die. So that's been sort of my life on a spectrum during this period.
Have you been prescribed medication, sir?
At one point, I was prescribed an antidepressant.
And approximately how long did you take it?
I think it was about a year.
And what was the name of the medication?
I don't recall the name, sir.
And who prescribed that for you?
It was I believe it was Dr. Carlin.
And he's to you?
He was my primary care physician.
And he was at what facility?
The Valley Medical in Greenfield.
And for some period of time, did you seek counseling?
Yes, sir.
And when did you first seek counseling?
I started a few years after being on the job.
Okay. Well, why did you seek counseling a few years after?
Oh, sorry, counsel?
Counseling.
Oh, counseling. Thank you.
I'm sorry, the question again?
Why did you seek counseling?
I had I guess it would be best coined a trauma response to a call that I went on. I woke up in the middle of the night screaming, and scared the hell out of my wife, and I thought that it was time to maybe talk to someone that could give me some advice.
And the counselor you treated with was who?
Dan McLean.
And how often did you treat with Mr. McLean?
Depending on what was going on, sometimes every week, sometimes every 2 weeks, sometimes we'd go months without seeing each other.
Did Mr. McLean provide any, was he authorized to prescribe any medication?
No, he's not.
Did you take any other medications besides the antidepressant medication?
Yes.
Okay, what other medication?
I'm on 2 types of medication for hypertension, and recently was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. So I'm on 2 types of medication for type 2 diabetes.
And for how many years did you treat with Mr. McLean?
In or around 2002, I believe, 2003 to the present.
At any time prior to 2021, did you review or edit, or did you review any session notes?
No, I did not.
Did you ever edit any session notes?
No, I did not.
Did you know that he was keeping session notes?
No, I did not.
And you would have seen the session notes when first?
The first time was relative to this case that I was aware that there were session notes.
Okay. In when in connection with this case?
I don't remember specifically.
Was it within the last year or so, or was it longer in time?
It wasn't longer in time.
Are you working now?
No. Other than retirement, I own a 2-family house in Greenfield that I rent, and besides managing that property and handling the finances for my parents, that's pretty much my day-to-day right now.
And your parents are alive?
Yes.
Where do they live?
My mother lives in Roxbury. She's 70. She'll be 76 years old this year in December. And my dad lives in Montego Bay, Jamaica, primarily, and he will be 78 years at the end of this month.
Are you making any plans to rejoin the workforce?
Yes.
Okay. And what are you planning, sir?
I love to teach. I think that is what I can do to contribute back to society. What I've learned over the last 22 years as a police officer. It was one of the things that I enjoyed about being a field training officer was putting out these little nuggets of information for new officers, and then sometimes, it'd be years later when you'd see that come back to you. And I guess that's something, if you're a teacher, you understand. I prior to getting injured did some training that made me eligible to teach at the police academy. And they call it Train the Trainer, and it's so I've got that at least entry level training to be able to do that.
All right, why don't you approach sidebar, please?
Right. I take it that's all you have before we get to the potential issue of retirement. Okay, I'm going to send them out for a little bit. I want to keep going.
Yes.
We still have an hour. Okay. Right, very well. Your client's not having heart problems, is he?
I don't think so.
Okay. Very well. Okay. All right. Ladies and gentlemen,
I need to spend about 5 to 10 minutes or so, conferring with counsel before we continue on to the and so I'm going to send you out with the ongoing instruction not to discuss the case with anyone, including amongst yourselves, nor to do any investigation or research, look at any media. I'll see you. I say 5 minutes. It'll be 10. Okay. I'll see you then. We're just going to 1 o'clock. Thank you. Mr. Buchanan, feel free to step down, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yeah. All right. The issue before me is whether to permit Mr. Buchanan to, please be seated, to testify as to alleged loss of retirement benefits, meaning that quantum, he gets, for example, 67% of his last 3 best years, whatever that was, versus 67% of his best 3 years if he were promoted. I'm not sure what that would look like since there were different steps, but the threshold issue is whether or not this was even identified as an area of damages. So I'll give counsel an opportunity I'll step off to retrieve whatever discovery you might have in that regard. Yes?
Your Honor, we did get a case, and Haddad versus Walmart. And in Haddad, the SJC held that expert testimony is not required in calculating employment damages, includes front pay calculations.
Okay, wait. I'm not even there yet. Haddad, I don't believe, addresses whether or not the failure to disclose damages precludes or permits introduction to trial. That's what I'm talking about right now. Okay? Whether or not that was identified as an area of damages as it is required to be identified, either somewhere in your discovery responses or in any of the conferences before this court meeting, final pretrial conference, final trial conference, whatsoever. I know it did not come in at final trial conference, but I did not do the final pretrial conference. So take a brief moment, look at that. I don't want to keep the jurors waiting terribly long. The threshold issue for me is simply whether or not there was notice. Okay? So I'll step off. Just let Ms. Doran know when you're ready. Thank you. All right.
What do we have?
Let me start off with Attorney Ryan, since the burden, so to speak, is on you here. What has been the disclosure?
Your Honor, so it's pled in the second amended complaint, was probably done in the first amended complaint, but also, Your Honor, in our supplemental answers to interrogatories, again, which were dated January 12th, I believe, of this past year.
Yep.
We state, in answer to the question is, set forth an itemized statement of all monetary loss sustained by you or on your behalf for incidents described in plaintiff's amended complaint. The answer reads, based on the differences in pay for a patrolman at top step and as a sergeant, had he been promoted in 2015, there was a wage differential of over an 82-month period totaling $85,505.
88.
Right.
88,000, correct.
Don't sell yourself short.
And then, Your Honor, the bottom of the paragraph says, additionally, had he stayed on the police force, Buchanan's retirement compensation would have been positively impacted by approximately $24,000 a year, assuming he lived to age 80. That is a 22-year span. And we then run that out at a then net value. It hadn't been present value of $533,000.
All right. All right, very well. And before I turn to you, Attorney Keston,
one last thing, Your Honor. The answer then said, produced in Buchanan supplemental document production are the documents from the town of Greenfield on which these calculations are based.
Okay. Which were payroll documents and...
Yeah.
Okay. All right, very well. And you expect to deduce from Mr. Buchanan what testimony?
The testimony that we would seek to introduce, Your Honor, at this time is the differential between his retirement based on the salary he was receiving versus the retirement that would have been on the 67-month time frame, or the 67% retirement between what it would have been for a sergeant at top step.
And for what period of time?
Your Honor, it goes out.
That's a necessary part of this equation.
For what time period going forward?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we would ask to introduce the U.S. Census Bureau life table.
Do you have that?
I do, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. And what documents, if any, is Mr. Buchanan going to be reliant upon in testifying? And in that regard, are you seeking to introduce them as exhibits?
No, the math, Your Honor, is based on what he's already done, which is
I understand that, but is he going to testify as to what the math is or simply the formulas?
the math for the retirement.
That's my question. Is he going to stand up there and say that I should have been making, $123,648.17, for example?
No, he's going to say that at top step, he would have been at $107,000.
Okay. All right. So let me turn to Attorney Kester for your objection.
They just invented this whole theory at sidebar. The disclosure talked about at the time that Mr. Ryan was trying to amend the complaint. The disclosure says that had he stayed on the force, maxed out, got his retirement, that's what you would have made. That's all they told us. Now, with the theory that has never been articulated before today, that there's a differential in pension based on his last 3 years. That was never disclosed as a theory. The numbers were never disclosed. It's really complicated because it's your 3 last past years, right? So for a year and a half, he was a provincial sergeant during the last 3 years. It's a complicated number, right? So figuring out your 3 best, he got the benefit of half that time. Right? I mean, okay, all right. I now understand what you're saying. In order to understand, and truly this is borne out generally by an accountant or an economist, but having said that, that doesn't mean that a witness cannot testify as to this, but it is complicated because he's testified that his pension was derived of his 3 best years or 3 best last years? What?
3 highest years, Your Honor.
Okay. So that he has then, his 3 highest years would have included years during which he was at least in part or in whole a provisional sergeant.
He was demoted in January 2019, so essentially all of 1920 and up until retirement in November 21, there's only 3-4 months where he was a provisional.
You said 3 best years, not 3 last years.
No, but so the greater part of his last 3 years on the job.
This is now, you have stated, and this is why I pose this question, are you saying 3 best years or 3 last years or 3 best last years?
3 highest years, Your Honor.
Well, that's what best means. All right.
Highest.
All right. So 3 highest years then will include those periods during which he was a provisional sergeant because he was at a higher rate during those years.
There's been increases since, Your Honor.
I don't see how this is going to come in. And I'm not going to, I may have to do a voir dire because I'm not going to begin to go down this road in front of a jury because this is a really complicated formula, all right? Because he needs to demonstrate, with all due respect, Mr. Buchanan, this is almost always done by an accountant or an economist, an expert, okay, who's rendered his or her expert opinion in this regard. He's going to have to establish how his current retirement benefit was calculated, okay? And he's going to need to other documents that set forth how the current retirement was calculated, for example.
There are, Your Honor. These are documents that are from the town showing that his 3-year average salary was $90,992. And
what are these documents you're referring to?
These were produced by it's an affidavit, business records produced April 5th, 2022.
Okay, can I see these, please? And I take it these have been produced?
It was my brother's subpoena, Your Honor.
Okay. Wait, one moment, please. So this is an application for retirement.
Your Honor, it's near the back of the package, I believe. It's the last 2 pages. It's PIRAC, last 3 pages, Your Honor.
All right, I see it. Thank you. Benefit calculation. Are you going to seek to introduce this document? I'm sorry?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And was this indeed produced pursuant to 23378?
Your Honor, my brother subpoenaed these records.
I understand that.
We waived authenticity.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
They're authentic.
All right. So,
tab 38, Your Honor.
all right, very well. Thank you. So this is already in evidence. And it has a calculation worksheet that gives the total pension amount of $45,000. So that this begins to answer my question as to how he's going to establish how his current pension was calculated without my belaboring all this. I think that this document would at least take care of that. Anyone have thoughts otherwise? So then the next question goes to how is he going to calculate his pension were he to have received his promotions? This is a very complicated benefit calculation that includes creditable service. He would have to, it seems to me, be able to walk through each of the line items of the benefit calculation, including those for his regular benefit as well as the option A benefit. So I suppose that if you had a foundation to establish what the 3-year average salary is, had he been promoted, and were that borne out by competent evidence, that you may get a number that is different than the $90,992. That would be perhaps a first step. Then you would need to have him testify as to what the age factor is. That is to say, each and every single one of these line items needs to be set forth with specificity for him to testify as to how much it is. That would begin to get us going in the right direction. Do you anticipate that he will be able to deduce testimony as to each and every one of these line items that effectively follows the format set forth on the second last page as well as the last page?
Your Honor, he's looking at it now. I know that he's very familiar with these numbers, but I believe the baseline testimony would be that the wage, Your Honor, is the 107 number, which increases it by $17,000.
What is going to be the foundational evidence that demonstrates that is, unless it's stipulated, which I don't know, I tend to doubt, but I would need that foundation. But I mean, truly, let me just say this: I've never seen anyone attempt to get in lost retirement through a lay witness. Lost wages, you can do that, okay? But this is a lot more complicated. All right. That doesn't mean that it can't be done, because the case law does provide that it can be done. But I'm only going to allow it in if it conforms with the actual benefit calculation, which we now have the benefit of. Okay. No. Let me turn to Mr. Keston, Attorney Keston. Let me hear from you on this, please.
Your Honor, this is not fair to the defendants. For them, this case has been discussed about multiple times. Obviously, Mr. Buchanan has been working assiduously to figure out how much he should get. And when they were going to try to amend it for constructive discharge, I saw that claim for the benefits had he worked to the end. That was their theory, right? Had he not had to relieve, work till he maxed out, that's the differential. I understood that's what they would get if they proved constructive discharge. Now, for the first time, on the third day of trial, We have a theory now, a different theory. We don't have, it's really complicated. The dates upon which, right, you have, if this happened that date, if this happened that date, this happened that date, if you had worked till then, it requires expert testimony and lots of time to prepare and notice. We have had no notice.
Well, let me say this. I'm satisfied that there was notice by virtue of the supplemental interrogatory answer. But that doesn't mean that I am not overwhelmingly troubled by how this is going to come in. I'll get you in a brief moment, Attorney Ryan. Let me at least give Attorney...
No, Your Honor. Your Honor, I do not agree that there was notice.
What about the supplemental answer?
The supplemental answer says, had he worked till he maxed out, this is the difference. It's not this.
Well,
this is entirely different.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but the concept of lost retirement benefit in a general sense was set forth.
In general, lost retirement benefit if they had a constructive discharge.
I understand
That's what was set forth. Not that if we don't have a constructive discharge, we're still claiming.
Okay, let's move on to the second tier of my concern, though. Do you want to address that?
Your Honor, on that, Mr. Buchanan, he candidly stated he doesn't have enough subject matter knowledge to testify.
I appreciate that, then. It's not coming
Heavens
in.
up.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, this is not easy stuff. You're in litigation.
No.
But thank you very much. Okay, so let me return this to whomsoever. So are you then done with your direct examination? Let's bring in the jury. Thank you all for your considered thoughts.
Should I set up?
Yeah. We'll have to go through to 5 of 1. I've got something at 1 sharp, so we'll end at 12:55.
No.
What is that line there?
That's binder 1, but yeah.
That's our copy.
Oh, we don't have a copy.
Yeah,
We don't have our copy.
That's our copy.
Yeah.
It's our only copy.
Sure.
My son was going to get back.
Mr. Buchanan, if you'd be so kind as to return to the witness stand. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you.
Jury entering. County Superior Court is back in session. Please be seated.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, thank you for your patience. Has anything come to your attention which has affected your abilities to remain fair and impartial? Seeing and hearing no affirmative responses, we're going to go to 12:55, and then we're going to recess until tomorrow morning. Okay. All right. Any further direct examination, Attorney Ryan? Okay. Cross-examination, Attorney Keston.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Buchanan.
Good afternoon, sir.
You and I have met on 3 previous occasions, right?
Yes, at least.
At least. Well, you've never stopped me, have you?
I'm sorry?
You've never stopped me as a police officer, have you?
No, sir.
Right. So we met 3 times at depositions.
Yes, sir.
Your depositions. Depositions, you understood, you testified under oath before the trial on 3 different occasions about events related to this case, right?
Yes, sir.
We met at the Greenfield, what do they call it, City Hall or Town Hall?
Town Hall. is what I call it, but you can call it City Hall.
We met at Town Hall at a conference room upstairs. And I took your deposition, Ms. Brody was with me at least the last two. Mr. Ryan was there representing you, right?
Yes, sir.
And I asked you questions, and you testified, you gave me answers under oath.
Yes, sir.
Have you reviewed those deposition transcripts in preparation for testifying at this trial?
No, I have not.
When's the last time you read them?
I haven't read them.
Have you ever read the transcripts?
Not in their entirety, no. I think the first deposition I read through, but
Hey, please pose another question.
Oh, I thought he was.
I don't. He's paused long enough. Why don't you pose another question?
Okay.
Yeah.
So you read the first deposition?
yeah, I believe so.
And that was back in what, in 18?
I don't recall, sir.
Did you read, and you recall I took two last year?
Again, I don't recall, sir.
You recall I took one on your birthday?
Vaguely, that does ring a bell. We had a conversation about that, yes.
And your birthday September 27th.
Yes, sir.
So I took it about 6 months ago. We had a deposition. You don't remember?
I remember the deposition.
Do you remember anything that happened?
I'm not keen on the details, sir.
Have you read the transcript?
I believe I have at one point, but I don't remember the details, sir.
Now, you put in your retirement papers the day after that deposition.
That sounds about right, yes, sir.
And you've been planning to put in for your retirement for at least 10 years before you actually retired, didn't you?
I wouldn't say that was accurate, no.
How long did it take for Dan McLean to produce records of your treatment to me? From the first time I asked him and you talked to him about it until I actually got the record.
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled for the reasons set forth in my ruling.
I don't know.
Well, you and he talked about him providing support for your lawsuit, right?
Support? No.
Well, let's talk about who he is. I know that you didn't mention his name in direct examination, did you?
I did.
Mention his name. So what's his name?
Dan McLean.
And what are his credentials?
I don't know. He's my therapist.
He's your therapist. And has been your therapist for 17 years.
Just about, yeah.
And you first came to see him as part of the Employee Assistance Program, right?
No.
Wasn't he AP?
No.
Okay. But you first came to see him. Have you ever reviewed his records?
No.
When you came to see him in part because of history of depression, correct?
No.
What are his records? I'm not going to hold you.
You want to just point the microphone toward him? Thank you.
Thank you. Something. The records are an exhibit in this case, and these jurors will get a chance to look at them. You first came to see him, according to the records, in May of 2005. That sound right?
That sounds about right.
Yeah. And you told him that you had insomnia, restlessness, poor focus, vivid nightmares after witnessing a death as a police officer, right?
That sounds about right, yes, sir.
You also told him you had difficulty with follow through with duties at work and a history of depression and social anxiety, right?
I don't recall that as being a conversation that Dan and I had.
And did he tell you that he diagnosed you with a depressive disorder in 2005?
No.
Do you recall that in 2010 you told Dan McLean that you were going to keep your interactions and your police work to a minimum, not to jeopardize the pension you were going to get in 10 years? You told him that in 2010, didn't you?
I don't recall that, sir.
And you told him in 2005 that you're going to retire in 2021, didn't you? I'm sorry. You told him in 2015 you're going to retire in 2021, didn't you?
I don't recall that, sir.
Well, you believe Dan McLean's an honest person, right?
Yes, I do.
And you have found out, after we finally strike that, did you talk to Dan McLean about the fact that the judge had ordered him to finally give me his records? The judge in this courtroom?
No, I did not.
And you know that we got the records late, though, right?
That wasn't part of my day-to-day. I don't know what was going on with the records.
You didn't know anything. Are you telling this jury, are you telling us today, you didn't know that there was a struggle for me on behalf of the city of Greenfield, Chief Haig here, to get your therapy record?
What I knew was that I had signed several releases and given them to Dan McLean.
If I may. Did you know...
Sir, could I please finish answering the question?
You may finish your answer.
Your Honor, was the yes or no question?
He had said he had signed several releases, and then he said, and. You can finish that statement.
And beyond that, what Dan did with that information or those releases is not part of me. I have no idea. I would go there so that I could talk stuff out, so that I could clear my heads, when necessary.
When was the first time you found out that Dan McLean was not producing his records and the court had to issue an order to it?
I couldn't put a date on it, but I did find out through Attorney Ryan at some point, and subsequent to that, signed another release that was given to Dan McLean.
And you know that I had to suspend your second deposition, which was taken in May of last year, because I still didn't have the records.
I don't know what the purpose of you suspending the deposition was. I don't know anything about that.
You were there when Mr. Ryan and I talked about it. You were sitting right there.
Again, this whole process has been quite unnerving, and dealing with it the way that I deal with it is to try to put stuff behind me and move forward. So the inner workings between you, my attorney, my therapist, anyone else for that matter, I try not to spend too much time focusing on that because it is a very heavy burden.
It's a simple question, Mr. Buchanan. You, myself, Mr. Ryan, the stenographer, and Ms. Brody were in the conference room in May of last year where I discussed with Mr. Ryan that I could not finish the deposition because we didn't have McLean's records. He was sitting right there. Do you remember that?
I don't.
Thank you. Now, you did arrange for him to write a letter for you to give to Mr. Ryan to present to the jury, right?
I'm sorry?
You and Dan McLean discussed him providing a letter, summary of your treatment, that Mr. Ryan could use to provide to the jury to get you money, right?
No.
Did you discuss him getting a letter to Mr. Ryan?
No.
No. Did you proof that letter? Do you recall that he sent it to you so you could proof it before it was delivered to us?
Dan sent me a copy of a letter that he was submitting, and I didn't. I that's it. He sent me a letter. I said, okay, that's what you got to submit. That's your business better than I know. I don't know what limitations you have as a therapist or what you're required to do. I'm just the guy that's showing up there looking for a little bit of help. So, the legal aspects of all of this with respect to my therapy, I was not, putting a whole lot of attention into that. And again, the troubles that you were having with Dan are frankly between you and Dan.
You weren't paying a whole lot of attention to what troubles? What are you talking about?
The things that you're mentioning, having difficulty getting records from him, I had nothing, no dog in that fight. I had no influence, no understanding, direct, except from when at one point I believe my attorney Tim Ryan said that we need for you to sign another release. So while I appreciate how
why don't you can pose a question, please?
Okay. You want to interrupt him?
I respect that. Please pose a question.
We have your texts.
Mm-hmm.
With Dan McClain. We have your text with Dan McClain.
Yes.
Have you looked at them?
No.
Do you recall discussing with him and looking at a letter to provide to your lawyer for this case?
Yes, and I believe that the text will reveal that.
Just a brief moment. He's answered the question. You may follow up if you wish.
Thank you. And you and he sat down and figured out how much money you should ask the jury for, right?
In the text?
In the session. Do you remember that?
So let me see if I can clarify the question.
The question is simple. I'll clarify.
Okay.
Didn't you and Dan McClain, in a session, discuss how much money you should get out of this lawsuit?
Well, that was a different question than the one you asked before.
Okay, go with that.
Okay. Wow.
Yes or no?
Just give me a minute, please.
Sure.
Yes.
Thank you. You stopped doing most of the job around 2015, didn't you?
No.
You stopped enforcing traffic laws.
That's not true.
Do you remember testifying in your deposition about it?
I remember testifying about my response to the incident with the young man was a motor vehicle stop, and effectively having my career hijacked because of a motor vehicle stop, that I had a reluctance to move forward with aggressive traffic enforcement. Now, having said that, there ain't a whole lot of traffic on third shift. So, the characterization is a little bit off, but with respect to motor vehicle stuff, Attorney Kester might be right. However, motor vehicle and arrests aren't.
Okay, thank you. Please pose a question.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. I get a little diarrhea in the mouth.
That's quite all right. Yeah. Can I see Councilor Sever?
It's a note from Oliver Wendell Holmes.
To you?
Yeah.
How much is it?
Okay. So I take it you're going to show him something on your phone.
I showed it to Mr. Ryan.
Okay. And you're not going to attempt to introduce this into evidence as an exhibit unless it is already otherwise.
No.
Okay.
Some questions about it.
Pardon me?
You've got some questions about it.
Okay. Are you going to seek to publish it to the jury
No.
or?
Nope.
Okay. Let's see where it goes.
Let's proceed.
Is there a video there or just one photo?
That's the photo. Recognize this place?
Yes.
You're very familiar with it, aren't you?
Well, yeah.
What is it?
It's a tire warehouse,
What street is it on?
Federal Street.
For how many years have you been spending your shifts that the citizens have been paying for you by sitting in your cruiser at the tire warehouse?
Well, I don't spend my entirety of my shift there. The tire warehouse is a centrally located position where I can respond to calls quickly, and so I can't quantify where I set up to wait for calls for service.
So unless they call you for service, you're going to be sitting there doing what? What do you do when you sit there? Do you play cards?
Just sit and watch the world go by.
Just watch the world.
Wait for the next call to come in.
So for
Sometimes work on reports. Sometimes study. Sometimes read the newspaper. You know, there's a lot of the times, frankly, is just spent going through scenarios in my head, trying to prepare myself for what might be coming up next. So,
while the other officers on your shift are patrolling Greenfield and dealing with traffic, drunk drivers, whatever else, you sit at the tire warehouse. You were sitting at the tire warehouse thinking.
I'm sorry. What's the question, sir?
While the other police officers on your shift were working, patrolling, stopping drunk drivers, stopping people driving recklessly, Officer Patrick Buchanan, for 6 years, was sitting at the tire warehouse through his shift, waiting to see if somebody would call him. If they didn't,
That's not true.
Ruminate.
That's not true.
Okay.
If
That's not true. That's fine. Thank you. Remember at your deposition, I asked you about your level of activity in the last 6 years, didn't I?
That's true.
And Mr. Buchanan, isn't it true that in a police department, the Greenfield Police Department, they bid the shifts?
That's correct.
And that means what? How often do you guys bid? Do people bid?
Every 6 months.
Every 6 months. It's done by seniority, right?
Yes.
And the least desirable shift by most police officers is the 11 to 7. 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., isn't it?
That's really relative to where you are in your life.
Okay. And relative to where you are in your life. And you chose to spend the great majority of your career working 11 to 7, right?
That's correct.
In which not much happens.
That's not correct.
You don't really have to deal with any supervisors, except the sergeant.
That's a supervisor.
Yeah, that's it. But in terms of the administration of the police, you don't even see them.
That's correct.
If you want to advance in the ranks of a police department, is staying in the 11 to 7 your whole career a good way to do it?
No.
Does it demonstrate initiative? Also, if you can.
Does what demonstrate initiative?
Bidding the 11 to 7 throughout your entire career so that nobody sees you.
I don't agree with the way that you qualified that question as far as nobody sees me, because clearly people are seeing me. You have photographic evidence of that. However, I initially selected the third shift because it worked best with my family. Raising 3 kids. My wife works full time. I'm able to work, come home, take care of the kids when they were real young, and then eventually they became old enough to take care of themselves, and work details and get ahead. So it was a shift that suited me at that level pretty well. Additionally,
I've been asking yes or no questions.
Well, all right, very well. Please pose another question.
We left something out about your daily activities, didn't you?
What's that?
Your business.
All right, this isn't a conversation. Please pose a question.
I'm sorry.
Please pose a
I've been
question.
polite. Your video business. You ran a video business, didn't you?
Yeah, for some years.
For some years, you ran a pretty active video business while you were working 11 to 7 in Greenfield.
That's correct.
And the video business was stressful, wasn't it?
It was.
And working as a police officer, you found stressful in 2006.
That's true.
And these stats that Mr. Ryan showed you, the career stats,
Mm-hmm.
they're completely meaningless, aren't they?
I don't agree, no.
You don't agree? Well, the career stats of the officers on those stats, you were one of the officers on the department much longer than the others, right?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
Let's make it easy. So if you work 10 years, you're in the department at the time these stats were produced for 22 years, right?
Correct.
And in 22 years, you made more traffic stops than an officer who was on for 2 years, right?
That's correct.
So the career stats mean nothing. You have to know how the years the officers were there to compare it. How active were you compared to everybody else, right?
That's correct.
And you also have to look at how active were you compared to other people on your shift, right?
That'd be reasonable, yes.
And then you'll have an idea of who's working as a police officer and who isn't, right?
No.
And you had the worst statistics for the last 5 years than any other officer working your shift, right?
That would be a reasonable conclusion.
So that drunk drivers in Greenfield were free to drive around as long as Pat Buchanan was sitting in the tire warehouse, right?
That's not true at all.
And how many supervisors talked to you about the fact that you weren't doing your job?
None.
How many?
None.
Nobody talked to you about your level of activity?
No.
Okay, let's talk about Chief Haig. I didn't mention him much. You've known him since when?
September of 2000?
You were still in the process of being naturalized when you applied for the police job, right?
Yes.
And you had to wait the 5 years?
No.
No? You were naturalized before 5 years? You were here 5 years?
The question was, did I have to wait 5 years to be naturalized? No.
No.
No, I've been in this country since 1970. So I didn't have to wait. It was just a matter of having to go through the process and the paperwork.
I get it. I had to wait the 5 years. Now, when you could not work as a Greenfield police officer before you were naturalized, right?
I couldn't be sworn in full time. However, I did work part time as a Greenfield police officer prior, and then there was a determination that I would not be doing any more police duties until my paperwork was completed.
And you, while you were getting naturalized, Chief Haig got a full-time position.
Yes.
Then patrolman Haig.
Yes.
And then you got the next position, right?
I believe so, yes.
And did you work with him at all? As Greenfield police officers?
Yes, I believe we did.
You had no problems with him, did you?
No?
You had problems with others, right?
You have to be a little bit more clear with that question.
Sure. Who is then Sergeant Bobet? B-O-B-E. Who is that?
Sergeant Bobet is probably one of my closest friends.
And he became your closest friend since you worked on the
Third shift. Yes.
He was the third shift sergeant when you came on?
He was one of 2 third shift supervisors.
Sergeant Bobet is white, isn't he?
Yes.
But you referred to him as a fellow minority, didn't you?
Yes.
Because he's Romanian.
No.
No. He's whiter than me, isn't he?
No, actually he's not.
Well, you and he were accused. Let's back up. Who is Patrolman Ting? Then Patrolman Ting, T-I-N-G.
He's a former patrolman with the Greenfield Police Department.
And what do you perceive his, I hate to use the word race. Did you perceive him as a person of Asian ancestry?
Check, Your Honor.
All right, sidebar.
Relevance.
Okay, so where's this going?
Ting accused him of racism.
Okay, objections overruled. But we're going to have to.
3 minutes.
Yeah, 3 more minutes, I think.
Your Honor, where's the evidence that Ting accused him of racism?
I'll have it.
But I mean, this is cross-examination. It's certainly in line. Okay, the objection's overruled. Ladies and gentlemen, we're just going on another 2 or 3 more minutes now.
Okay. Please repeat your question.
Patrolman Ting, you perceived him to be of Asian ancestry.
I knew him to be of Asian ancestry.
Did you perceive him to be a person to be a minority?
That would be fair, yes.
Did you perceive yourself to be a minority?
Yes.
Did you perceive the Romanian Bobet to be a minority?
Yes, and primarily because Sergeant Bobet spoke with a very thick accent, and most people meeting him for the first time thought that he was of Hispanic descent. So there was sort of this internal joke between Bobet and I, and that when people first would engage with Sergeant Bobet, they would think that he was a minority.
All right, we're going to suspend there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, with the ongoing instruction not to discuss the case with anyone, nor to conduct any investigation or research or look at any media reports. Have a great afternoon, and looking forward to greeting you tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Thank you very much.
He's riding back in church.
So we're doing all 3 of those co-defendants together, I take it, right? Okay, great. Okay.
If you can step down, all right, thanks. Well, have a great day.